feeling like sitting in those stands and rooting for your team and jumping up and down and having your emotion in it. You can't do that on TV. When people look at Bruiser Brody on TV, they don't get near as emotional as they do as when they're sitting there at ringside. So all these people in all these rural communities, if they don't have a chance to go out there and actually touch Bruiser Brody and see him in person, he's really not at the top of his business. He can only be at the top of his business when he reaches those in New York City, those in Waxahachie, Texas, those in Blueville, West Virginia, those in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. You can only be the top when all wrestling fans get to be in touch with you, and that can't be done just on TV.
Would you be willing to talk about, in your case it's especially different, how one night you're a fan favorite challenging for a title, and a few hundred or 1,000 miles away from here tomorrow you could be everybody's most dreaded nightmare trying to beat their favorite. And that must be a weird thing to adjust from one day to the next. You're different people.
I don't think it's a hard adjustment problem after 15 years. In the beginning, if you would go somewhere and people would, let's say, choose you as the one they wanted to see beat, it might irritate you a little bit. After doing it for so many years, you find out that your business is in the ring and the fans' business is in the stands. And as a paying customer, he must have the right to choose who he wants to win.
You're making his mind up by how you portray yourself.
I don't think so. It seems strange that I might go to a real conservative small town like Salina, Kansas, and be so acceptable with a ponytail, when every father out there is hoping that his son doesn't have a ponytail. People's emotions and people's thinkings are deeper than just what they see on the outside. I think that people, when they make a judgment about somebody, I think it's because they either know something personal about him or they don't know anything about him. And in my case, when I go to some parts of the country, they've been watching me for so long, they know what's inside, so it's easy for them to like me. On the other hand, I'll go to another part of the country where they only see me a few times and they'll look and they'll say, this is the kind of guy that I'm not so sure about, so they make a different type of judgment about.
But if I haven't seen you before, if I see you on one night, you're forcing the issue, you're more aggressive than maybe any wrestler I've ever seen. On another night, you're letting the other guy be the aggressor for a little while and then responding, reacting to him. You're causing the action in one case, you're reacting in another.
Okay, first of all, I think that everybody who's looking at me right now should understand that Bruiser Brody never let anyone do anything to him. I don't know about the other professional wrestlers. I only know about Bruiser Brody. And when I go in the ring, it doesn't matter whether I'm in Texas or New York, or it doesn't matter whether people like me or dislike me, I'm going to be just as aggressive every night. Now, some nights it may look like I'm not aggressive. If I do this 30 nights in a row, sometimes these old legs, they don't go as good as they did 15 days ago. Sometimes physically, I don't feel good either. And sometimes my performance may not be what it was the night before. But when I do go in the ring, anybody who signs a contract to wrestle Bruiser Brody must know that he's going to be aggressive to the best of his ability.
Okay. I have one more thing, and that is you've been in the business a long time. You paid a physical price, it's obvious. Is it still worth it to you? And from what I hear, the older you get, the more you feel all the years that you put into it. I don't know that, but I've heard that. Is it going to be worth it to you at age 60, do you think, or 70, to have had the career you've had and to have done what you've done all this time?
Sure. As I look back at this point, I played 3 years in the NFL. I wish I could have played 15. At that particular time, when I was released by the Washington Redskins, the coaching staff and the administrators at for the Redskins ball club thought that they had somebody who could do that job at that position better than I could do it. And that's the choice they made. So I went on into professional wrestling. As I look back over 15 years, I don't say, oh, I wished I would have spent 15 years in the NFL. Certainly I would have been grateful to have 15 years in the NFL. But I'm equally as grateful to spend 15 good years in professional wrestling. And I'm 37 today, and I think that I probably got 10 more good years left in professional wrestling. Now, if I had 15 and I had 10, I'm looking at maybe 20 or 25 years in professional wrestling. I don't think there's anybody, maybe George Blanda, who can say they spent more than 20 years in the NFL. So I'm very happy with the way fate has taken its course. I didn't ever guess that I was going to be a professional wrestler. Once I started in professional wrestling, learned sort of the ropes and the ins and outs. If I had it to do over again, I think that I would probably even pass up my 3 years in the NFL and devote them to wrestling because it has been that good to me.
You said something that makes me want to ask you one more thing, if you're willing to answer, and that is a lot of it seems a trend almost in pro wrestling. Bruno Sammartino had seems as glorious as a career as you could have. He got out of it, and then he's back on a given night wrestling for McMahon. In his case, he still puts out well, he still looks good, and he still wins. But there's other guys who were at the top, and instead of just walking away, I would think the money that they accumulated would have been enough to let them do that. They stay around and they become the guy who the people are starting out build their reputations on, and this guy becomes enough. And so all those kids that were watching this guy, and he was the greatest 10 years ago or whatever, and now he's just he's a preliminary wrestler, and he's not near what he was, and all his credibility, all that he built up through that career gets kind of tossed aside. Why do so many wrestlers choose to let that happen? Why don't they walk when they've hit the point where I can't do any more, or I can't do it any better, and the promoter's going to use me in a way I don't want to be used?
That's a tough question, and I don't know whether this is the right answer. But in every professional sport, and perhaps every business, if everybody who reached the top in whatever their business is bowed out at the top, that particular business would suffer as an industry. What you have is evolution, is what you're talking about, evolution of an athlete, evolution of a wrestler. The only way that new wrestlers starting today can ever reach the top is they must wrestle the guys on the top. So if all the guys on the top bowed out because they got a pocket full of money or for whatever reason, then the guys down here starting out would never have the opportunity to learn what those guys on top took 20 years to learn. I don't know whether I can go from wrestling main event back to wrestling in the first match. I got to say I admire the guys that can do that. I don't know whether I can do it, but I do know this, that if that day comes that I have to go back and wrestle in the first match and the second match, then it's my obligation, I guess you would say, to give back to professional wrestling and the new guy starting what wrestling gave to me, which was so good. Now, if I bowed out at the top and said goodbye to professional wrestling, and everybody else did that, I don't really know how the guys starting out would ever get to the top. They got to wrestle against the competition in the sport. So I think that it's no different than the guy who plays 5 or 6 years and he's an all-pro starting right guard for the Dallas Cowboys. And here comes a rookie into camp and he beats the guy out of a job. Now they still need this guy who was an all-pro for 5 or 6 years to back up this new man. Well, if the guy who was all-pro, he just gave it up and said, well, I'm not staying with the Cowboys no longer because I'm not first string. I don't think the Cowboys could go on and be successful. They've got to have the experienced and seasoned ball players, the ones that have gone up here and are coming down here. And they've got to have a bunch of ball players that are just starting here. And it's the same in professional wrestling. So when I look at Bruno Sammartino or some of the other guys that people look at them and say, well, they're not like they were 10 years ago. Maybe they're not. But they're probably making a bigger contribution to wrestling today than they did back then.
That's a great answer. Is there anything you want to add while we're talking?
No, I'm happy to be here, and I don't care about all those other wrestlers. If they don't want to come to the small towns The rural communities, that's okay. Bruiser Brody will always come, touch the people in every community from coast to coast.